guy running with Latin. The guy run, my friend, but they're gonna catch him. You see that, my friend? They're gonna go get him. They're gonna go get him, my friend. Look.
What's up, fam? It's your boy Demuir here, purveyor of all sounds underground. Thank you for joining me on this YouTube Thursday. We will be providing an overview of the Sonarworks Reference 4 software. But before we jump into things, what I need from you is a little bit of that SLC. Subscribe, like, comment, and hit the notifications bell. Before we jump into things, full disclosure, we have partnered with the Sonarworks team on this video. But the reason why I said it's an overview is mainly because of the fact that I already purchased the software after hearing a number of amazing things about the software itself and doing my own personal reviews and research on the product itself. And I gotta say, it has been a substantial impact in my production workflow and overall balance to my mixes. So what I'll do is I'll just talk through a few of the things about what I like about the software and why I went forward in purchasing it in the first place. And then I'll show you the details here on my DAW in terms of how it is leveraged in my workflow, and you can see it work real time. Okay, so why did I purchase the software in the first place? The biggest reason why I purchased it was I had moved into a condo out of my previous townhome, and I knew I just couldn't keep up with the massive requirements of doing multiple car tests. Although I had my room professionally treated and designed, I wanted to make sure that I got the most out of my mixes within this room. So the brilliance of this software is the fact that it has multiple profiles for different monitors and headphones that you may encounter, and it develops those profiles and says, how do those perform in this room? Headphones are a little different because it's just self-contained, but when it comes to the monitors, that was the part that was most intriguing to me, because the reality is that you can have the same set of monitors and put them in different rooms, and the things that you hear coming from those monitors can be two completely different experiences. So by having the software installed, it allowed me to ensure that what I was hearing was actually what I was getting. And the only way to get to that through the use of the software is to see how those monitors perform in the room, and then it makes slight adjustments to say, okay, you need a little bit of a boost in the lower frequencies or a little bit of a decline by a couple of dBs in the highs because of how the monitors are performing in that particular room. So that is a tremendous value add to me, and it eliminated any sort of need to go in the elevator and go down and do a car test of the track that I was working on. So the next part of the value add for me was ensuring that I got balanced mixes all of the time. That level of consistency would be something that would be new to me, because the way I used to do things was, I know my room better than any piece of software, and I thought I was greater than any piece of room correction or monitor correction software out there. And the reality was, every time I sent mixes out, I would sometimes, the few times that I did, I would get feedback from mastering engineers as to where to make small corrections. And again, that just added more time to the process. So by having guaranteed, consistent, balanced mixes in the fold, it saved me oodles and oodles of time, and my mastering engineers approved, the approach overall. And I thought, given that I invested so much into actually treating the room, why not get the most out of what we expect from this room in terms of the kit and the monitors that I have in here, in terms of what was outputted from each of those mixes. Okay, so let's jump right into things. This is Sonarworks Reference 4. I got the system-wide version. Don't mind my delayed highlighter. I need to get a new one. So if you guys can have some recommendations on a better highlighter, I'd really appreciate it. So this box here, the way Sonarworks Reference 4 works is you take a microphone and you stand at 30 different points in the room in order to be able to determine, measurements of, how far apart the speakers are, and it sends different signals through to develop a profile of your monitoring situation. So I have the Yamaha HS80s, and I've had them for some time, and after doing that analysis, I sort of expected this. So let's have a look at the before picture. And what this represents, let's get out of here, is the curve of each of my monitor's behaviors against the frequency spectrum. So you can see here some pretty drastic stuff, which I'm going to, chalk up to the fact that it's just attenuation. I've had these monitors, I want to say, for about 5 or 6 years. So pounding these speakers, and I don't play them too loud, but facts are facts. They're self amplified, and what we're seeing here is an attenuation in the bass frequencies. So basically from 0 to 100 hertz here, and just over 100 hertz is a bump in the frequency of about 6 dBs higher, and then it dips a little bit. I'm going to say this is probably about the 150 200 hertz range, and then it's relatively just below the flat mark, or 0 dB. And for the most ideal monitoring situation, you want the line to be flat. But this is just telling you how my speakers behave in the room without any sort of correction. So you could see here, if I didn't have Sonarworks Reference 4, I would be overcompensating for the bass, because I would think that there is basically not enough bass. And funnily enough, in my last room, when I didn't have this software, my mastering engineers were telling me that my previous mixes were indeed overcompensating for bass, and they had to, do extreme things in some cases to lower it, or even just call me and tell me to fix something. And over here and in this section is something that I absolutely love in terms of just saving your ears, is it creates a safe amount of headroom space here, so you can toggle it on and off. That's the default at 8.6 dB below 0, and you can move it around and then see how that sounds, or just come back to where you have it locked in. So we have a defined profile of how my monitors behave in this room. You'll see that I've titled it 75% of the sub, because what I found was, when I was measuring the signals to develop the profile, the first time around, I had my sub, you can't see it on camera here, but it's on the floor here. I had the volume all the way up, and because the different parts of the frequency spectrum pass through the sub, that was coloring the analysis in a negative way. So I had to tweak that a few times just to get it to a point where I was comfortable. And for me, in this room, in terms of other tracks I've listened to through Sonarworks, about 75% of the sub volume worked for me, because I mix with the sub on. So here you have the profile, and then let's have a look at the correction. So this is basically an inverse of the profiles from your monitors, which ultimately makes sense, because this is the software telling you what it has to do to get to a flat signal here. So you'll see when I have the plugin enabled as I'm mixing, or because I have the system-wide version, if I'm streaming something on Spotify or listening to a demo that's passed to me, I'll make sure I have this on just to make sure I'm hearing the mix as it's intended to be, whether it's Spotify or a demo I'm listening to. So you can see here a fair amount of correction is happening, about 6 dBs from 0 to, I'll say that's about 70 to 80-ish hertz, and then another bump that's probably more in about the, I'm going to say 10 dB range, which is quite high when you think about it, just below 100 hertz, and then you'll see again the inverse. So where there is a bump here, I'm going to say there's about 120 hertz, you'll see Sonarworks is doing the correction by bringing things down whenever a signal is passed through. And now I'm going to A and B this later, so you can hear the difference of what things sound like with Sonarworks being off. So it does all of its corrections, which is again the inverse of the original profile of the monitor's behavior in this room. And then what you should see is just the ultimate result of being as close as possible to the flat signal. So I'm going to take out the correction line and just leave the before and after lines in the analysis here. So you could see here still the lower frequencies are still behaving a little bit differently, but this is, I'm not too concerned about this because it's a bit lower than about 40 hertz here, and it's easy to correct because for one, you can't hear it, and it's just a frequency analysis thing. It's all rumble, and as you know, if you looked at my master chain video, I shave out the first 30 hertz, so that's not a problem for me. But you'll see the rest of it after Sonarworks does its corrections is relatively flat. That's what you want. You want to be able to hear a sample that you're looking to EQ in its flattest reference, so you know the changes that you're making to the signal are the right ones for that particular signal. So I'm just gonna let you hear a track running through this, and it's pretty looks. I put this out last year, so let's have a listen to it with Sonarworks on and off. Let's roll. I'm going to fast forward a bit more into the music.
Look pretty for the picture, honey.
So it's like a pretty grooving jacking track here.
That's it.
And I'm going to shut Sonarworks off.
That's it.
You'll hear the volume will take a bit of a jump when I shut it off, so be careful with your monitors, and that's because of the safe headroom function here, but you'll see what I mean. I'm going to take it off here. Quite a difference, right? This is with it on. Do some gain matching here. Switch it off. This is switch it on.
Pretty for the picture,
Off.
honey.
And on. So I'm hoping you heard some of the differences there because it's tremendously different when the plugin is not engaged, and you can imagine with that difference, if I didn't have the software in place, the type of mixing decisions I would make. It's kind of frightening in some respects when I think about it. Like, man, I would have EQ'd the kick so much differently if I didn't have this software in play. So it's absolutely a tremendous piece of kit to have. And as I said at the top of the video, although we're partnering with Sonarworks on this, it's an overview because I've already purchased the software just based on my own research, and I think it's an absolute must-have. But if you decide to go ahead and purchase the software, I highly recommend easing into it. And what I mean by that is, you know, the percentage amount of how much it is influencing your mixes here with the dry wet signal. When I first started off, I had it back here at 75%. So you could see the variance in the line here where it's saying after, you know, the simulated result, because I have it at 75%, how far away from flat it is. And that's all, you know, coming down to, you know, my, you know, workflow previously being working in a studio that just didn't have any sort of room correction technology, and now coming into it. So it's been several months, and I've been slowly incrementing this by 10%. I'd say, you know, every, you know, 1 to 2 months I would increment it about 10%. I'm now at 90%, and I purchased this back in November 2018. and it just feels comfortable to me. I'm comfortable with the software and how it's tweaking the sounds within this room, and it just makes complete and utter sense to me. I'm very confident in the degree of balance in the mixes that I'm getting as a result of having the software. It's again just an absolute must-have, and Sonarworks is not paying me to endorse the software in this matter. I just think if you're a maker or creator of underground electronic music, and you're always having to fight with the balance and the overall mix, and especially the low-end frequencies, this is just great to have, even in a room that's treated like mine with bass traps and rads here. All the better to ensure that you get what you expect out of your mixes with a software of this type. The other thing I would say is the thing is just so profoundly accurate that I did a test with Marco, who also installed studios for Carlo Leo and other top guys in electronic music, and he brought in his own measuring tools, and we were curious just to see if it would come up with a similar curve as Sonarworks did, and it absolutely did. Like, this bump after 100 hertz came up in his analysis, and we were just laughing about it and saying, wow, this thing is incredible. And it only enhances the experience of your productions and how you go about doing things, and it adds a ton of value for your mastering engineer to always be receiving well-balanced mixes from you. So this comes highly recommended for me. I encourage that you go out, at least do your research and check it out. But I think that the tool is great. And one last thing just before I go, when you're bouncing out your projects, it's important to have the software disengaged, because when it's on, it's influencing your mixing decisions. But obviously, when you bounce it out, you want the results of that, because if you leave it on and you bounce it out at that time, you're just doing a correction on the correction, if that makes any sense. So it's important to make sure you have it off, and that reflects what your mix is as a result of the Sonarworks influence. And there you have it. Tell me what you think about the software after you've done some research, and any other suggestions or comments. I'd be very interested in hearing it, but this is a must-have for any DJ producer getting into the game of electronic music. Much love and respect. Peace.